In this episode, a man's 3 pet lions turn on him. He has raised them from cubs, nurtured them to adulthood, and educated thousands of people at his South African lodge with them. But one day, after more than a decade together, the man turns his back on his lions, resulting in him being fatally mauled. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying lion attack on zookeeper Leon van Biljon. Welcome to Final Affliction. In Hammanskraal, 30 miles north of South Africa's Pretoria, lies Mahalo View Lion Game Lodge. It offers accommodation in a range of self-catering lodges overlooking the surrounding bush and neighboring Dinokeng Game Reserve. Today, small game like impala and kudu can be seen on site, and the Big Five can be seen in the neighboring reserve. People can escape the hustle and bustle of the big city and find relaxation and calm amidst the relative oasis. The site used to be most famous as the home of the Lion Man, Leon van Biljon. The main attraction was the 3 lions that were kept there. Their names were Rambo, Katrin, and Nikita, and Leon offered lion walking tours in which he would give a detailed lecture about lions before taking visitors down to the enclosure to see the animals. The lions were semi-habituated. They had lived at the reserve nearly all their lives. In 1985, Leon and his family had moved to the lodge. Back then it was just open field, but Leon spent time introducing wildlife to his land. He built lodges to accommodate visitors and offered game drives. His children grew up there, and business was going well. In 2006, he bought 3 lion cubs. He spent all day with them and often all night too, sleeping in their enclosure until daybreak. Although he had 2 daughters of his own, Leon treated the 3 little cubs like his children. He was devoted to them, and they were loyal and tame with him. At least they were for the first 13 years of their lives at the lodge. Leon saw the potential of keeping the lion cubs. Through them, he could educate people and, in his own way, help to conserve these remarkable animals. He was clearly passionate about his lions. He offered guests the chance to see the apex predators up close with just thin wires separating them. Leon would talk to the guests whilst inside their enclosure, stroking the lion's fur, commanding the lion's respect. He gave lectures about the importance of these fascinating animals and allowed visitors to watch at feeding time. Guests would relax in their lodges at nighttime and listen to the sound of the lion's roar, their moaning and groaning echoing across the neighboring reserve. It was a magical experience for the guests. The lodge looked out over the adjacent Dinokeng Game Reserve, where famous lion whisperer Kevin Richardson lived with his lions. Leon wasn't the only man who had a special bond with his lions and who used that special bond to educate and inspire the general public. Leon was in his 70s. He had recently put the site up for sale so that he could retire. He had worked his whole life, and now it was time for him to enjoy his time with his expanding family. He was a grandfather and a great-grandfather now, and his work with the lions and at the lodge had come to an end. On the 20th of August 2019, it did end, but not in the way that Leon had planned. He was still very much known as the Lion Man, even in his 70s, and still offered the daily talks and game drives in the reserve. He wasn't just in charge of the lion's well-being and welfare. He also took care of the site's maintenance. Leon had noticed that there was a patch of fencing along the perimeter of the lion enclosure that needed repairing. He stepped inside the enclosure as he often did and made his presence known to the big cats. As he looked at them, all 3 of them, he didn't notice anything unusual. Rambo, Katrin, and Nikita just watched their owner opening the security gate and closing it behind him. He had done this 1,000 times before. He calmly walked over to the broken fence and inspected it. Then he made a fatal mistake. Whether complacency got the better of him or whether he had done the following hundreds of times before, we don't know. But he turned his back to the 3 lions and knelt down on the ground. This was the mistake, and it was to be the last mistake that Leon would make. As if signaling dinner time, seeing Leon in the vulnerable position seemed to trigger a switch in one of the lions. Its eyes stared at its owner. It didn't hesitate. It didn't mock charge. Instead, it ran at Leon and pounced on top of him within seconds. Leon didn't see or hear it coming. It happened at lightning-fast speed. The lion leapt down from one of the enclosure's platforms and launched itself onto Leon's back. Instinctively, it went for his neck. Its huge jaws opened wide before clamping down around his throat with a force of 650 psi. Its 4-inch canine severed muscle and artery in one bite. In the seconds that followed, Leon managed to let out a cry. This was heard by the staff, and they came running. They were shocked at the scene before them. Immediately, they shot the lion that was on top of Leon, and then they shot another that was standing just feet away. But it was too late. Leon lay motionless on the ground. Blood poured from his open neck wound. He didn't make a sound. He was dead. The other staff tried to get to him, but there was a third lion in the enclosure, which they couldn't get a clean shot of. They called the emergency services, but there wasn't anything anybody could do. The third lion was eventually killed in order to allow paramedics into the enclosure and attend to Leon. He couldn't be revived. The bite to his neck had been catastrophic. The attack had been a complete surprise, and it had happened so quickly. Leon had taken his eyes off the cats for a second. He had made the fatal mistake of crouching down with his back turned. Instinct took over, and the lion attacked. It is so easy to be lulled into a false sense of security when working with animals that you have known for many years. Leon had literally raised those lions from cubs. He had held them in his arms and lain with them whilst they slept. They knew him inside and out, and he thought he knew them too. It was a tragic incident that Leon never saw coming. He trusted the big cats with his life every time he entered their enclosure. No matter how habituated an animal might be, it is still a wild animal and should be treated as such. Instinct runs deep. It cannot be wiped out or erased from an animal's DNA. Now, not only had Leon lost his life, but so too had 3 lions. Attacks like this have happened before. It seems lions are the least predictable of the wild cats when held in captivity. 60% of all captive big cat attacks occur from captive lions rather than captive cheetahs, tigers, mountain lions, or jaguars. After the initial shock and devastation that followed his death, Leon's family have now said that they are at peace with what happened. It gave them some comfort that Leon died doing what he loved, working in a place he loved, and with the animals he loved. At the time of Leon's attack in 2019, there had been 40 incidents in South African captive carnivore facilities since 1996. 13 of those had been fatal. Director of Animal Welfare Organization 4 Paws, Fiona Miles, said that they had found that in facilities where human-animal interaction is frequent, the animals had seemed to reach breaking point and had lashed out. Although it is easy to think that animals that are in regular contact with people would be less aggressive towards them, in some cases, it seems the opposite is true. It's clear that Leon loves his 3 lions enough to refer to them as his children. They weren't raised for hunting and had spent that majority of their lives outside of a cage. There was never any incidents involving the lions acting aggressively to visitors. Out of nowhere, he was fatally mauled by his 3 children, after which they too sadly met their final affliction.